And so we're going to start off by talking about why organizational context matters in product building. We're going to talk about the primary and what I'll call secondary variables that impact product. And then we're going to talk about how to maximize or capitalize on those variables to provide impact and value to your organization. So if I asked you guys what product looks like at your company, I think I'd get a different answer from each one of you. A lot of you would tell me that it looks something like build, measure, learn. We work in product squads that are autonomous, and it'd be pretty much the same answer, save for a few alterations, minor, some maybe major. And that's because this is modern product management. This is what we've been taught, at least when we got into the industry. In reality, product looks a little something more like this, and it depends on where you work. And so, build, measure, learn has all these other components. And, in my world, I have to talk to different stakeholders, and not just, one or two, a ton of them. And when we get data back and we're analyzing the results of it, it's not just, one read of it. It's, a lot of different views, and we have to debate on it and do all these things and come to a consensus. And I think that's like normal to an extent. But what it looks like on a granular basis, or what it looks like thematically, is very different from organization to organization. And so understanding that context is going to help us evolve or avoid pitfalls early in your venture and as you develop within it. It's also going to help us to empower ourselves and to provide value early and often. So same variables, they can either be detriments or they can be really useful. And most of us got into product to be in a very impactful position. And so leveraging and capitalizing on these variables is really important. And in that same vein, I want you all to avoid meltdowns. Mental health is really important. And so I'll tell you what, when I, got to ABI, my first few months there were really, really difficult. It's its own beast. It's a really, really large company. It's traditional, it's analog. But it's more so because I didn't really accept the realities of the organizational context, more so than the fact that it was a difficult environment for product to be in. And so again, understanding the organizational context, accepting it, and working within it are going to be really important and really helpful to being impactful as a PM in your organization. So what makes product different at each company? What variables contribute to it, and why, how do those variables determine the effect of product or its usefulness within the organization? When I look at, products in a very a product organization and companies in relation to that in a very simplified view, I created a matrix that looks at, size and digital maturity. I've had the opportunity to work at a handful of organizations ranging from large traditional to small digital and in between. My career has taken me from PwC, a really large accounting and consulting firm, to the Not Worldwide and One Kings Lane, so smaller digitally native companies, onto ABI, and also an equally large traditional company like PwC, a little less along the way of the digital transformation than PwC was at that point. And so for me, these experiences have taught me a lot about how product can look differently and how it can operate differently. And I found that the size of a company and its digital maturity, its relative digital maturity, will have a very big impact on what I'll call secondary variables, and in turn determine a lot about how product works within a given company. For purposes of this exercise, I've also added in Google here. I haven't worked there, but if I can think about a really large digitally native company in that upper right quadrant, it fits well. And then for purposes of this exercise, I'll just focus in on these top three quadrants of large traditional companies, small digital ones, and then large digital ones as well. So in my experience, I found that digital maturity, or I found that companies that lie on the digital maturity curve or the scale, it tends to affect what matters to the organization and product teams beneath it the most. And so, we're talking about objectives. So what matters and like, what are you gearing towards? What are you goaling towards? User centricity, how much does that matter within a company based on digital maturity? And what I'll call ancillary responsibility. So things that are outside of the normal day-to-day of a product manager or a product team. With that, size also tends to have an effect on how a product team works. So that's everything from process and communications, how you go about getting consensus and where decisions are made, speed versus risk, and the resources that are available to you as a product manager. And these two areas, digital maturity and size, aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. And they're not perfectly accurate, but I think they're useful when you're starting to think about either going to a new company or a company that you're in and how to navigate it. So when I look at like what matters, when I look at a large traditional company with a product org is a good sign, right? It shows that they're making an effort towards moving in the right direction, towards a new frontier. But often they're only just getting on their way. And so you find objectives that are focused on lagging measures, the company-centric view of the market, and additionally the progression of the employee base towards digitally literate or becomes really important. And so that onus of like educating and moving the business towards that direction, not even forward necessarily, but towards digital authenticity, is often put on the product managers in the business. And so this is like a very short encapsulation of what mattered when I got to ABI. We looked at revenue, we looked at cost, and for our unit spinning up an e-commerce program within ABI, ROI was really important, and doing it at scale was really important really quickly. We always looked at what the technology could do for the business, and less so what it could do for our end user. With that, if I look at a small digital company, their objectives tend to focus on product market fit and scaling, right? So less so on optimizing anything and just trying to grow and find where they fit and what they can take. User centricity is key, right? Because as you're trying to find product market fit, as you're trying to scale, you really have to understand what your users want as you're building something new and niche. And then, PMs wear a lot of different hats. There's less complexity in the organization. There's less roles or defined lines between functions. And so PMs kind of have that flexibility to do different things. When I move on to a large digital organization, you can start to look at, objectives that are focused, yes, on optimization, kind of like a large traditional one, but they also tend to look at new opportunities. So again, when you look at Google, they have their core ads business, they have, search that's built on top of that, maps and all that. And they're constantly optimizing these products that they have in the market, but they're also doing things looking for brand new opportunities that are years out. And I think that's what you're going to find at large digital companies, as opposed to just looking at lagging measures. With that, user centricity is kind of like a built-in foundation that operates at scale, and it's part of the dogma and the culture of the company. And so user research is probably a very defined and mature organization, and is also prioritized. But what you also find is that, within the product management organization, roles are probably hyper specific, right? You fit into a part of a large product organization and you work on a small component of it, and it ladders up to a larger thing, but you're kind of like in that spot, and that's that. Moving on to, how you work. So again, this is what, size tends to affect. Large traditional companies, they tend to have a strict process, right? And they value optimization for, maximizing throughput and really trying to get the most out of resources. And that is something I experienced again at ABI. It was very, production focused. And if you think about beer, it's a physical product. You think about putting, creating beer, you get supply, you're brewing, you're bottling, you're distributing. And so every step of the way, you want to make sure you're getting the most out of the process. And so you'll find that process is strict and it's often standardized, and they're trying to get more out of it. With that, the scale also means that leadership values making sure that there's alignment across functions. So that product is aligned with sales, is aligned with marketing. That means that there's a lot of different people involved, a lot of different cooks in the kitchen trying to produce a product. That makes it really difficult sometimes. And it means that decision making isn't purely on the product team. And you could say it never is anywhere. I think that's like a fair assessment. But increasingly so in a large organization, it's hard to really make a definitive decision without getting a lot of alignment. Because of the size of a company like this, because of maybe how old it is and how entrenched it is, they tend to be risk adverse. And they tend to prioritize that risk aversion or safety over like speed. And so you'll find that speed tends to suffer. And resources can be abundant, but in my experience, what I found is that business cases are critical in order to get anything that you really need or to unlock those abundant resources. Comparatively small digital organizations, process tends to be flexible or almost like devoid of it in some of them, right? And so you can kind of shape process, you can make decisions. It's optimized for delivering things quickly and learning quickly, which is an awesome kind of place to be in. Again, given that it's a smaller organization, cross-functional alignment is not necessarily a big hazard. And you're able to make, decision making is more simplified. You're able to move a little more quickly in that area. Risks also tend to be lower depending on where you are in kind of like the startup or the curve there. And so you can kind of move quickly with that. Drawback might be that resources are limited, but that always is a debate. On the large digital end, again, large organization, similar to a traditional one, you're looking to optimize things internally and have a good process and then move. While there is standardized process, it tends to be enforced, but centered around delivering outcomes, as opposed to a traditional organization that's probably still looking at outputs and trying to make that transition. Cross-functional alignment is still probably going to be complex because there's a lot of people, but usually the product organization is more formalized and has more autonomy to make decisions over the direction that the product takes and how it moves forward. You'll see some similar things around risk aversion, and then resources are probably abundant in an organization like Google, for example. So now that we understand kind of like the variables at play and how they might look in a particular context, how can you take advantage and capitalize on these variables to provide impact to make yourself useful? In a large traditional company, I think the most impactful thing as a PM has to do a lot about change and being a change agent. And so if a large traditional organization has a product management function, it means that they've identified the need for moving in a digital direction. So what really becomes important at that point is, as that organization is taking shape, as it's growing, is to help the larger group, the larger organization, move forward in that direction. And that means being able to influence change to convince people not just of a product direction, but of how to think more in a product-oriented way is really important. It also means that you have to work within the status quo to change it. So being able to ground product strategy and decisions in like core foundational business mechanics, how those companies typically think and operate, is going to be really important to move it forward. And then working, cross-functionally and collaborating with people who come from different backgrounds or might not have as much digital experience is also going to be really important. And I think that's important in any product role. We always talk about communication, collaboration as core skill sets of product managers in any role. But I think it becomes increasingly important in an organization that's more traditional, more analog, and large. With that, moving on to a small digital organization, taking initiative, and I put it at the bottom here, but scrappiness and speed, taking initiative might actually be the most valuable thing that you can have, or skill set that you can have as a product manager in a small digital organization. And that's because, again, there's not a lot of shape or strict rules or lines drawn between functions. And so, being flexible and taking on non-traditional PM tasks, seeing something through end to end, even if it's not in product, becomes really valuable to the organization. User centricity, your ability to conduct user research and understand what users are looking for, or what the market might look like and how you can meet it there, is really, really important and really valuable in a small digital organization. And then with that, in a large digital organization, you'll see similar things as the other ones, but in a different combination. So again, knowing your user, understanding your customers is still king here. Showing strong fundamentals in that area is going to be really important. Scale means that working with other functions effectively is really useful and highly valued. And then, because of the maturity of these businesses, having that understanding of the intersection of business mechanics and product is really important. And so a slightly different combination than the other ones, but you'll see similar themes across all of these things as you go through. And so that's all I really have. I want to open it up to questions now, and thank you for listening. Thank you for having me. And I'm very happy to discuss any questions that you guys might have or dive into anything more deeply.
Awesome. Thank you, Kurt, so much. So many great insights and a lot that definitely resonate with me. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to just unmute, or if you're more comfortable, you can certainly use the chat feature just to type out a question if that's easier for you. But yeah, what questions do you have for Kurt?
Do you have any, hey Kurt, do you have any suggestions on, I guess, driving alignment between the stakeholders, especially if they somewhat have different OKRs and interests?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen misaligned OKRs in, I would say, probably all contexts that I've worked in, or objectives, and whatever you work in, KPIs or OKRs, whatever it is. I think that's a really difficult hurdle to overcome, especially depending on how entrenched or how tied KPIs are to like compensation. So at ABI, targets are heavily tied towards compensation. My first year there, our sales team had a totally different target than our product team. And so we were heading in two different directions that often conflicted. So the easiest way to fix that stuff is obviously, or the root cause of it for me has always been like misaligned targets and fixing that. If those are misaligned, I think, and you don't have any control over bringing those towards each other, I think the next best thing is to make trade-offs, right? And no one ever wants to make trade-offs, but they're a reality in what we do. And so for me, it's understanding how to minimize the impact of making a less than favorable trade-off in the short run for long-term success of the product. And so you have to give a little to gain a lot, I think.
Thanks.
Hey, it's Buddhima. Question on user centricity. What is it like at where you're at right now? How do you kind of do that at scale? And what does that look like?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I think there's some really interesting things at ABI. I think historically we've done a fair amount of surface level research on our customers. We, being a physical business, we do market visits to our customers, and we'll go on a sales route with a sales rep, visit a customer, see what their business is like, see how they actually operate on a day-to-day. And so it's been like a really great part of our company's foundation. But at the same time, we tend to think that we know everything and that the sales rep knows everything, and there's nothing else to be learned. And so it's always kind of been like, we met our customers 2 decades ago and our customers are the same, and that's that. So what we've been trying to do, driven from our product and specifically our design group, is try and move that forward. We have a customer research function, and we're separating like a user research function away from that, because we have like an operational capacity that we serve our customers in. We also have like a very much related but digital capacity in which we serve them. And so we have like 2 separate research groups that we're setting up to do that. But in the end, for us, it's been an education project to convince people that we really don't know as much as we think we do about our customers. I'll tell you that the COVID situation has made it much more difficult, because again, we used to rely on these market visits. We visit a country, mainly in Latin America, and we'd go visit these customers in person. We're grounded, so we're not, going to do that. So we've been trying to do, use things like Maze or usertesting.com to like connect with our users, to like test out things, but a lot of them have limited data. So they don't want to like engage in something that's not, core to what they're trying to do on a day-to-day. And they're just also not used to that kind of stuff. They're not as necessarily like digitally savvy. And so we're running into our own difficulties right now. We're trying to navigate them, incentivizing customers to participate in surveys and prototype testing and all that. But the dynamics changed a little bit because we can't do things in person. But nonetheless, we're starting to figure out and get our wings back.
Cool, thanks.
I have a question. So if an organization is not digitally forward or digitally process transformative, like some product teams are very forward in how they approach the product building process itself, like running in a startup mode versus running in another mode. What are some of the standard product metrics or KPIs then you would start measuring across 10 product teams, say 10 products that are building? When they're at different stages of building products specifically, what are the executive KPIs across teams that you would suggest?
Yeah, I'll give you another anecdote on ABI. When we first started out, the executives wanted to see basically where their money was going. And so the easiest way to analyze that was, here's the money in, here's the number of resources that we get with it, and here's the number of points that we deliver with it. And it was throughput in that sense. Maybe even before that, it was, let me see the features that have been delivered. And so, separate story, but that led to very like feature-oriented roadmap, like a feature factory kind of style thing, if you will, which is a tough kind of like cycle to be in as a product manager. I'd say with the metrics, we've since evolved towards like proper, what I'll call like product metrics and user metrics, and like looking at adoption, looking at retention in certain areas. We've really moved away from looking at individual teams and what they're contributing, if you will. Each team has like their own KPIs. We're not as formalized in holding them to those KPIs or meriting them for that. But it's just like starting to build the muscle of thinking about what's important to your area of the product, so that in the future, one day, we're like really like, you're autonomous, you run on these metrics, and that's where we want to get to. But at the moment, we're more so looking at like a product level set of metrics around adoption, retention, and some purchasing behavior around like buyers and recurring buyers and engagement.
Sorry, just to follow up on that, for adoption, like the metrics which are adoption, retention, satisfaction, just in case, for those three, would you say, especially for B2B products where the universe of customers is, and it's not B2C product, whether if it's a B2B and the universe of customers is limited, for example, an internal logistics team, an internal team, or in an internal product in itself, how do you really differentiate the adoption, retention, satisfaction? Because there's a limit to
it's a great question, and I meant to call it out, but one of the things I ignored in like my analysis is business model, right? And like that has a massive effect on how you build your product and go to market. But I think that's like a more obvious one, so I left it out. When I think about, B2B or internal like employee, operational software, for us, it's about like ease of use. And so I think ease of use can be measured, and it depends on the product, obviously. But it's like if an employee is going to be forced to use a certain product, adoption doesn't mean anything, and retention doesn't mean anything. In the end, you're trying to understand how easy it is for them to execute their tasks and like how efficient they are in it. And so, as we've built some like sales rep products, some logistic products, and it's all about how effectively someone's able to complete their normal tasks through our new products. So it's all about efficiency for us on that side. Does that answer your question?
It does. So would you say it's more like feature satisfaction versus like adoption towards the feature? How much is the user using the feature, the internal team itself, and how happy are they, which can be kind of NPS, but not really NPS because
Yeah.
it's just feature level
Yes,
use?
we measure both NPS and engagement, not for like our internal products, but NPS for our customers. We're trying to move away from NPS, and so we created like this engagement metric that's more representative of some of the core parts of our application, I think. On like our internal facing products, what we think about is kind of like what you were saying, right? So outside of the core, I have to do these tasks as a part of like my job. What are the other things that a internal user is using as they go through the product, to understand like whether they're getting value out of it, whether it's useful, and whether we should continue investing in those areas.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That helps. Thank you.
Cool.
Hi, Kurt. Merrick here. You sort of alluded to this through your presentation and your some of your answers, but I guess maybe can you give us a little more detail on what sorts of products you're like, what are the key features are that you are overseeing, and how, how who sets those priorities, I guess?
Yeah, totally. It's a great question. So I oversee our customer product organization. So basically, we have we're like 180,000 people at the company that have been doing the same things across the world the same way for the last 20 years. And so my group is a part of a larger product organization that's a part of our digital transformation group, which is basically looking to bring our sales, logistics, operations all into the 21st century. With that, the core product of all this is our, customer-facing e-commerce product, which I oversee. That is to, historically was to supplement our sales reps that go into the field and visit our retail customers. So basically how we sell beer to retailers who then sell to consumers. And now it's seen as, the primary and almost like sole vehicle for sales in the company going forward. With that, our sales reps are now changing into more business development style roles to help like grow our retailers, like sell out into consumers, less so focus on selling in our product and like administrative invoicing and payment collection and things like that.
And as a follow-up, we as product folks, we think user-centric is always benefiting sort of the best possible life for the end user, for the customer. I find very often the user-centric term gets lost a little bit within companies, because it's easy for groups who are risk averse to say, yeah, user-centric means no change because users are clearly happy, and any change could only make things worse. So that's user-centric. How do you answer that type feedback in a large organization?
It's a great question. I think one of the great experiences that I think we've had as an organization is pulling back the layers of the onion. And it's like, we have a lot of old, outdated systems in our business units in different countries, and a lot of antiquated process in how they like deal with our customers. And every time we go and try to advance the product, we like uncover something else that's like really poor, and the operations are really poor in the existing technology. I think as quickly as you possibly can, you have to identify things where your customers are unhappy. And so if that means like running surveys or doing research on the side and building a case as to why there's an opportunity, that's what needs to be done. If if you can't get any movement going forward towards making changes, I think it starts with that kind of like understanding that customers aren't necessarily the utmost happy. For us, we had to start pushing that agenda, but our organization kind of like took it on themselves over time, and it was like, oh, like here's NPS, and now we're gathering NPS, and oh my gosh, our customers really don't like how we do business. And so it's like, I think if you start pushing the agenda, at least in our organization, it kind of took it on itself and really wanted to improve upon that.
Thank you.
I will use the awkward silence because that's when the good questions come.
I have another question, not really software related, but more on the beer side. Like how do you guys keep tabs on the market, so to speak? Because I mean, I'm a huge microbrewery fan, and just kind of looking at how the markets are shifting, and not to say you guys are losing market share. I'm sure there's a huge market who still consumes that beer. But is there like a product management lens? I would say there's probably not a product management team looking at the beer, but is there someone who looks at that product, even though you said you focus on like enterprise B2B? Because I worked in a similar setting as well. Like we always think of the B2B, but what about the B2B to C? Because they are one end of the day will define what happens to the B.
Right. It's a great question. I think our view on craft is that it's mostly peaked in most of the mature like beer markets. It's kind of taken as much share as it probably will. I think seltzer is a different thing. That's like got its own wave that it's riding. But yeah, we have teams. I think you imagine an organization that large has people that are constantly just looking at the market and trying to identify how to either get on the current wave or look for the next wave so we're not behind on it. So yeah, we don't look at what beers are necessarily selling, and they're all different by market too. So we have very localized portfolios in each market, but it is an interesting market to be in.
Is there a digital first or almost digital only way to sell beer? Is there anything that, I mean, obviously there are liquor rules about how it's, physically delivered and sold, but like, say you have somebody that just like either lives on an app, or you're trying to reach a channel that, or maybe you're trying to maybe you are developing a brand that has or doesn't want to spend any budget, and is there like a super lean way to, have you thought about that? Have you tried stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, we have basically a revenue management team that works with not our product team directly, but with the product to, highlight and push certain products and promote certain products and pass discounts through our e-commerce product. And so, historically we had to go out into the market and, put manpower there to really push a brand into the market. Honestly, I think like digital is such a cheaper version of that. So we have like a marketing stack, if you will, that's built on Segment.io and Braze. And so we push things to our content management system, to different banners or ad spots in our application to start highlighting new products or products that we really want to see grow. We'll hit them with in-app banners or push notifications, and then we still have like our offline reps still in the market if we want to use that channel. But for us, digital is the low cost way to do it, given some of the tools that we have. Cool.
What do you call like your on the ground reps or the people that go out? Now, are them outside of Anheuser-Busch? Because I have a nephew that's a senior account manager, and he spends most of his time at home on the computer, and he goes out and sees a few customers, and he is for ABI.
Yeah.
A senior account manager for you guys. So, how are you doing that? Are you focusing more on sending them guys out more or what?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I work mostly with Latin America. The US is a market that we're addressing next, but it's a more complicated market because of the 3-tier system. So, we don't sell directly to retailers. For the most part, we sell to wholesalers who then sell to retailers. So it's a little more complex there. It doesn't fit like our current, I'll just call it architecture for our stack. But basically each country kind of like approaches it a little differently. And so, with COVID, a lot of the reps basically just couldn't go into the field, and the only thing we were doing was delivering beer. With that, e-commerce became the only channel essentially available. Obviously in the US, we've had a different approach to it. It has been like a nationwide approach. And so different, states have worked on different rules. And so where possible and where it made sense and was safe for our employees, like we sent people still into the field and all that stuff. So I think it depends on like the case and the location and the dynamics of like the 3-tier system that they're probably working in.
Hey, Kurt, I had a question. When you mentioned thinking about big companies that want to digitally transform, whatever that might mean to each business, and you going from small, nimble to big, potentially slow, potentially challenging to work in. How did you make that decision? Like, what were you thinking about in terms of trade-offs, in terms of growth opportunities? Yeah. Just curious how you approach that for yourself.
Yeah, for me, it was definitely on the growth opportunity side. So I kind of like, whenever I'm looking at a new role, I kind of assess 2 main things. It's how interesting the challenge is or big the challenge is, but also like the size of the opportunity. And that's both like what the product could become, but also like where I could grow to as an individual. So the Knot was an amazing place to do product. It was almost academic. It was like a test tube, and you could sit there and do product the right way. We had product leadership that had the ultimate buy-in from like our executive team and the CEO, and so it was a great place to do product. But it also meant that like it was very stringent. Like we were processes that we followed and things that we believed in and did them in a certain way. And for me, that was great. When the ABI opportunity came around, initially I was like, I don't want to work for a beer company. That doesn't sound interesting to me. But as you kind of like go through the process, you learn a little bit more, peel back the onion, and it's like, this company is amazing. It has a vast amount of resources at its disposal, and yet it's only doing so much. So that meant that I could, come in, establish like a way of doing product, start building a product culture, a product team, and really leverage the existing assets and resources of that company to do something really interesting. And so I kind of like assessed it on those tracks, and for me, it really made sense. But a vastly different experience than the previous.
I'll bet. Anyone we haven't heard from yet who's keen to ask her a question? All right. I won't let the awkwardness drag on too long. Two last things from me. First, we used to do this in person, and it was always fun and engaging. So we'll give it a try in this forum. We like to do shout outs. Anyone who's looking for a job, anyone who's starting a business and is looking for customers, unmute, give your pitch. And yeah, really anything that you're looking for that you think the community might be able to help you with. And I can start because, I'm hosting. We at Etsy are always looking for product managers. We're looking for a lot of other roles too, but we're certainly looking for PMs. So if you just go to etsy.com/careers, we have a bunch posted. Of course, we're based in New York, but given the current times, we're open to many different places. So if you're interested in working at a big but still growing incredibly fast e-commerce company, yeah, take a look.
Similar plug there. On the ABI front, we're consistently hiring as well. So we are a mostly New York team, but also distributed. We have a large part of our engineering group and some of our product team are down in Brazil, in the state of Sao Paulo. But also just given the nature of things, we have some remote roles that, we have in product as well as product design coming open. So please reach out.
Okay, so I have a last question. I think since Kurt, you know a lot about change management because you've been pivotal in AB for that. So what is your take on what is the 2 or 3 things that you would suggest building a product office team or building a team ground up? You would say the 3 things that focus on this aspect of change management when you say change management in a traditional non-digital, less digital organization.
Yeah. I could talk about this for probably 2 weeks on end. But really trying to sum it up, I would say you kind of want to be like an imposter, right? And you kind of have to play by the rules that are in place, and you have to change something from within. So I came in with a very idealistic view of product. Again, it was like academic almost at the not what we were doing, and a great experience. And I held steadfast to those when I got here. And I still hold our principles true, but it's you almost have to let go of some things to fit in, understand why things work the way that they work, how people think the way that they think, and you really have to almost assimilate yourself and get into things to understand the state of things as they are. Mm-hmm. And then only when you're inside can you actually start to move things forward. Once you've kind of assimilated yourself, I think it's making the right business case. And you're almost have to create a headache as to why doing things the way that you've been doing them doesn't quite do it anymore, won't get you ahead. Sometimes that's showing potential erosion over time and erosion of value and stagnation. Mm-hmm. Other times it's showing opportunity. So a lot of what we did at ABI was all about opportunity, and it was about painting the picture of a company rich with assets and resources that wasn't utilizing them to their maximum potential, and then painting a picture of how you could leverage those to do so much more than we were at the point. So for me, it's kind of those 2 things. I'd say it's assimilating oneself to really understand the company, the history, the why of how things work, and then making the case either for a more promising future or a better way of doing things than happened done.
Okay. Thank you, Kurt. Thank you. Yeah.
Any other shout outs? Reserved bunch. Okay. Oh, Daniela, you just went off mute.
So yeah, I have a question regarding. I work for a native digital company, and we usually are high for traditional large company to make any work around new products, of course, mostly software products. So what are the traditional company are expecting when you hire this native digital company as a vendor? What are the most valuable things that those company can bring to your traditional and large company?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, a lot of like our countries like are separate. They're kind of operate independently, but you know, we're starting to pull everything a little more together globally. I think a lot of them pull in more digitally native companies or consultancies to add color to their strategy, right? And so it's like they tend to know the direction that they want to go in, but they don't really know how to get there. And so for us, from a global perspective, it's kind of what our product and engineering group does, but we only have so much capacity to kind of do so much. And so we're always looking at a more global, holistic, standardized picture of things. And then the markets still have like their own specific needs that they don't necessarily have the expertise in-house for because it's not what we've invested in over time. And so I think it's like, they know that they want to go digital. They know that they want to transform their business, but what does that actually look like on the ground? And what does that mean for the different functions within the group? Pulling that all together, I think that's where we tend to pull in like digital help in a local arena.
Right, thanks.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I'm just going to give one quick plug for our next speaker next month. On November, let me get this right, November 18th, we have Vanessa, who is the VP of Digital Products and Services at H&R Block. She's going to be talking about building customer-focused teams. Really, how do you immerse yourself in some of the things that Kurt was describing, you know, the customer needs, and really build teams around those outcomes and those goals. So it should be a really interesting talk. It'll be our final one of the year. We're going to take a break in December. So thank you all for coming tonight. Kurt, thank you again so much for being our speaker and sharing lots of insights, and hope to see some of you folks next month.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Thanks, group. Great talk, and I appreciate the questions.